Thank you, Dr. Mohiman. I hope all of you can see my screen as well.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for the opportunity and good morning, everyone. And thank you, Pam, for the excellent initiative. I hope the best team wins, which is probably the Nico team, not to bias anyone. Anyway, so I'll start the slideshow. Just to give you an overview of the NICU, all of you are familiar that we have a very good NICU. It's a level 3 NICU. We have 33 beds, including 2 negative pressure isolation rooms. We have a team of 3 consultants, 6 specialists, and 42 experienced nurses. We have all the facilities that you need for a level 3 NICU. We have the most sophisticated incubators, ventilators, including high frequency inhaled nitric oxide, therapeutic hypothermia for babies with birth asphyxia. We have a very busy obstetric team led by Dr. Marwan, and the fetal medicine team supports us a great deal led by Dr. Hisham as well. We have 450 to 500 deliveries, which we expect to go up per month. And based on about 10% of the deliveries needing admission, we are fulfilling the road, getting about 15 eco admissions. We have an 80% average bed occupancy as well. We have excellent support from the pediatric surgeons, Dr. Nail, and now Dr. Roger has joined the team. He has a valuable service of urology to add to the pediatric surgical service, and pediatric cardiology support with Dr. Haitham, pediatric respiratory with Dr. Vishwanath, pediatric endocrinology. Again, Dr. Salima has greatly strengthened our team by joining us recently. And of course, the very regular support we need from the pediatric ophthalmologist and mainly Dr. Syed from the Moorfields team. We have very good support from the rehabilitation services as well, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy with Dr. Sara and team, and radiology support, excellent support from the lab. As you might be seeing in the recent releases, we have excellent results. Babies as young as 22 weeks maturity, weight as low as 450 grams have been salvaged with good results. And I should congratulate the whole team and especially the hard work put in by the nurses and the physician team. All of you are doing a great job, and I hope we will continue to provide the best care as well. Now, to give you an overview of what happens in the case of a premature baby, I'll quickly run through a case as an example, and we can have any questions in the end as well. So we have prematurity defined as birth under 37 weeks of gestation, and recent advances have improved the outcomes even in extreme preterms. As I was saying, the 22, 23 weekers were not surviving when I was training, but now we see them more often. So here we have a mother who presents to the obstetric unit along with her husband. She is a primigravida. The pregnancy was uncomplicated so far. There was possible liquor draining at 26 weeks of gestation, and she has some contractions. The assessment by the obstetric team confirms preterm premature rupture of membranes and early labor. So we gave her dexamethasone and started her on tocolytics to reduce the progression of the labor, if possible, to give time for the steroids to act. Antenatal steroids have been in widespread use since late 1980s, and it basically stimulates the release of surfactant, which is stored, as well as encourages the fresh production by the type 2 alveolar cells. We can give either betamethasone or dexamethasone. It's given as intramuscular injection. The course is usually 2 to 4 injections, depending on what you're using, over 24 to 48 hours. It's used at or about 24 weeks, and nowadays we are extending it even lower if the parents are keen to manage the baby actively with impending preterm labor. You don't keep repeating it, so we should time it appropriately. We shouldn't use it just on the basis of a vague suspicion. If there is a clear-cut reason that the labor is progressing, you would give that. The onset of action usually is within a few hours, so even if she's likely to deliver in the next few hours, we suggest giving it. The full benefit is only reached by 24 to 48 hours, and usually the effect doesn't last beyond a week. That's why the timing is important. You don't waste it. Repeated courses aren't recommended, and that's why the obstetrician has to be careful in choosing the right patient. So the benefits, it's been shown to reduce the incidence and severity of respiratory distress syndrome, as well as improved survival and reduced intraventricular hemorrhage. The reduced illness severity as well as the overall hemodynamic stability may contribute to the non-respiratory benefits, because it's mainly the reduction in the RDS that we see visibly, but the other effects are as associated effect of this hemodynamic stability. So the neonatologist met the couple. We explained the prognosis that we expect at 26 weeks and the expected course and problems related to the prematurity. When we meet them at this stage, we always tell them it depends on the actual time of delivery, because being there in the labor room at that stage doesn't mean she'll deliver immediately, because the aim of the obstetric team is to try and prolong the labor as possible, and prolong the pregnancy as possible. We briefly discussed the problems related to prematurity. Again, at this stage, we wouldn't go too much into the depth unless there is any specific antenatal scan concerns or anything. We would just give them an overview of what to expect. And sometimes if the mother is stable enough, they can come for a tour of the NICU as well. So the survival and neurodevelopmental outcome data, we have lots of studies, mainly based on the Epicure 1 and 2 studies from the UK. We have many studies from the US, the Vermont Oxford Network, the Scandinavian countries as well. The survival rates is improving at the fringes, and it used to be 0 at 22 weeks. Now it's 5 to 10% at 22 weeks. It's 10 to 30% at 23 weeks, 40 to 60% at 24 weeks, 65 to 75 at 25 weeks. Interestingly, when I was training like 25 years ago, the 28 weekers used to survive at this level, but now 26 weeks onwards, we get a 80% survival plus, and 28 weeks onwards, we get close to 90-95%. So it's mainly this group of babies that keep us on our toes. The most important aspect of prematurity is the survival, but the neurodevelopmental outcome of the survivors is very important as well, because the baby is developing in an environment away from the mother's womb, where it is light-proof, soundproof, and comforting for the baby, with regular stimulus from the heartbeat of the mother and her breathing movements, nothing more. Unfortunately, when the baby comes out, we have to stimulate the baby in many ways. We have to do procedures. There is a risk of infection associated with them as well. So all these changes, the way the baby gets stimulated, the brain is developing rapidly, and both the risk of bleeding in the brain, the infection risk, as well as the way the brain is developing externally with so much more stimulus, leads to a higher disability rate. So if you look at the less than 26 weeks, there is only 49% who have no disability. Severe disability is seen in 23% and other disability in 25%. When we say disability, it can be cerebral palsy, it can be blindness, deafness, intelligence reduction, and so on. Seizures may be there as well. The survival increases progressively with each week, as I said earlier, and the developmental outcome also improves progressively. Between the 22 and 25 weeks, once they survive, the outcome isn't much different between them. The patient, she stabilized initially after she received the tocolytic, and she received 2 doses of steroid. She went into labor again after 3 days, and she went on to deliver by SVD. So the idea of giving the tocolytic worked, so there was time for the steroids to work. The baby was a live-born baby boy at 26 plus 3 weeks. The birth weight was 1.1 kilo, which was appropriate for the gestation. The baby was delivered in a plastic bag. The reason we deliver in a plastic bag is to avoid the insensible water loss, because the baby's skin is very friable and they are in radiant heat. If the water vapor evaporates, they quickly lose heat from the evaporation as well. So we keep them under the radiant warmer with the plastic bag wrapped. So whatever water vapor evaporates stays within this bag, and this increased relative humidity stops the evaporation. The same principle applies to the use of the incubator in the NICU, where we highly humidify at 90% or so. So you would see misting within the incubator if you come into the unit. Delayed cord clamping was also done in this baby, and it is definitely beneficial in both term and preterm babies. It is now part of the NRP recommendations. We should be considering delayed cord clamping in preterm babies, especially because the hemodynamic stability effect reduces the risk of intraventricular hemorrhage. The blood that is in the placenta is actually part of the fetal circulation, and because the lung is not open much in the womb, only 10% of the circulation goes through the lung. It's going to the placenta for the oxygenation, and this blood should come back when the baby's lungs open up. That's why we should wait for the baby to breathe or get the lungs open, and then we should clamp the cord. And delaying for 60 seconds is quite safe if the cord pulsation is good. Even if it's a preterm baby who is not actively crying, you don't need to worry. Just feel the pulsations, and the 60 seconds delay is well worth it. The baby can be held at or below the maternal pelvis and abdomen. There's a slightly higher risk of jaundice, which these babies are monitored anyway. It shouldn't be a problem. So this is how tiny a small baby can look like. This baby is around 500, 600 gram, not the baby that we are discussing, but they're very fragile, very tiny, but still they have all the features that you would look for. They open their eyes, they may clasp their fingers around their hands, and so on. The baby needed some positive pressure breaths and then had a heart rate which is good, respiratory effort was good, but the chest wall recessions indicated that the baby had the lung disease of prematurity. Even though we gave the steroids, because the gestation is very immature, the baby has a significant disease. So the baby was intubated, which means we put a tube in the airway, gave the surfactant, which is a medicine to reduce the surface tension in the lung to reduce the stiffness that is deficient in the premature babies. The reason I told you about the steroid being given was to stimulate the surfactant. The baby was then transferred to the NICU in transport incubator. So this is this is not our incubator, but this is a kind of transport incubator you have on a trolley with a ventilator. The gas cylinders will be at the base as well. Surfactant is given to improve the surfactant efficiency of the premature lung. It's the most common respiratory problem, and the surfactant therapy increasingly was used in the late 1980s, and it became routine in the mid to late 1990s. Surfactant improves the survival and reduces the complications like air leak and intraventricular hemorrhage. These days, we don't even intubate the baby. We have less invasive surfactant therapy where we can continue non-invasive ventilation and just try to pass the catheter into the airway when the baby is breathing spontaneously to give the surfactant. So this is becoming popular as well. So this is the baby intubated in the beginning, and this is the chest X-ray which shows the whiteout lungs on both sides. This is a typical grade 3 to 4 hyaline membrane disease. The baby has lines inserted for access, and we have the feeding tube, endotracheal tube, and we have the lines in the belly button, which is called umbilical lines. The baby was initially stable on ventilation. The umbilical arterial and venous catheters were inserted. The umbilical arterial catheter helps us with sampling and also has invasive blood pressure monitoring enabled. The umbilical venous catheter is used more to infuse the TPN. Sometimes we choose to insert a peripheral percutaneous central line. And the baby was started on total parental nutrition. These babies cannot reach full feeds for around 10 days or so. So we give them TPN and gradually start the mother's milk and progress with it. We nurse in an incubator with high humidity, as we mentioned, and the baby was started on antibiotics. We give that in preterm labor and also in the babies who are unwell, at least for the initial 48 hours to make sure the culture is negative. The baby had regular ultrasounds, and there was a grade 2 intraventricular hemorrhage, which was monitored, and there was no further worsening. The baby had expressed breast milk. We support the breastfeeding. The lactation consultants meet the mothers antenatally, and we also start progressively encouraging them. Even if the baby is unwell, we encourage them to express milk, and we start by feeding tube, usually orogastric if the baby is on nasal support. And the repeat period ultrasound was stable. The antibiotics were discontinued after the negative blood cultures. Baby was extubated to nasal CPAP on day 5. The more routine course is to extubate within the first day, and nowadays we extubate fairly quickly. This is a baby on CPAP. The pressure keeps the chest compliance supported, and baby is comfortable. We have other forms like non-invasive positive pressure ventilation and also the high flow nasal cannula. Depending on the severity, we choose the mode, but these are all non-invasive modes in the newborn period. After the first week, on day 10, the baby reached full feeds, the umbilical lines were removed, and the baby was on CPAP in air on caffeine. Caffeine is given to stimulate the breathing and to reduce episodes of the apnea of prematurity, which is basically related to the immaturity of the respiratory center in the brain. By day 15, the baby had suspected apnea, reduced activity, feed intolerance. We suspected sepsis or necrotizing enterocolitis. Unfortunately, these babies have a low immunity. The interventions we do breach their normal innate immunity barriers. And so there is invariably a risk of infection, which we take extreme care, but still it may happen. And necrotizing enterocolitis is a specific condition for premature babies where the gut wall gets necrotic. Sometimes the air gets into the intestines, the wall of the intestine, and the inflammatory markers increase. So it behaves like sepsis as well, but we have to be careful with the tummy. Sometimes you need surgical intervention. The baby was started on antibiotics. Lumbar puncture was done to rule out meningitis. The abdominal X-ray in this case was suggestive of necrotizing enterocolitis. So as I said, the air may dissect through into the wall of the intestine. This is called nematosis intestinalis. And sometimes we get perforation with gas inside the abdominal cavity. This is where our pediatric surgeons support us. Sometimes they put a drain if the baby is too unwell to be operated, and sometimes they may operate as well. And depending on the findings, they either do a stoma or they do an end-to-end anastomosis. So this baby during this period was kept off feeds, antibiotics were continued and needed reventilation. The blood culture grew coagulase negative staphylococcus, and the CSF culture was negative. The CRP improved to less than 6 by day 6 of the episode, and the repeat X-ray was normal by day 5. Feeds were gradually introduced.
Which one?
The antibiotics were given for a 10-day course with negative temperature 7 days course.
Ruby, please mute yourself, Ruby.
The baby established full feeds again, and this was tolerated well. The baby was tried off CPAP on 24 days of age. This was not tolerated. Then finally on day 42 was changed to low flow nasal cannula. Nowadays we switch from CPAP to high flow nasal cannula, and the baby came off low flow at 40 weeks corrected gestational age. Because the baby needed oxygen beyond 28 days of age and beyond 36 weeks, this is called bronchopulmonary dysplasia, which is one of the commonest problems that keeps the baby longer in the hospital when they're premature. The other problems that the baby had, there was neonatal jaundice in the first week, which was treated with phototherapy, which is very common again. These small babies, they don't produce their own red blood cells, and we keep sampling them, so they need transfusions multiple times in the beginning. We have a concern called osteopenia of prematurity, which has reduced a lot with improved TPN and fortifiers added to the human milk. In this baby, it was managed with phosphate and vitamin D supplements, which again is routine for the small babies as they start tolerating feeds. I mentioned the ophthalmology follow-up with Dr. Syed's team. So we have ROP, which is in this baby stage 2, pre-threshold, but it resolved luckily. When they start getting to full feeds and they're starting to have the BPD-like episodes, sometimes they have gastroesophageal reflux. In this baby, we treated with Gaviscon and domperidone, but mostly we don't use domperidone. We prefer to use Gaviscon if there is no concern. In this baby, we used it very late in the course. Otherwise, we wouldn't use it soon after the recovery from NEC episode as well. We try to avoid medications for the treatment of reflux as far as possible. So the baby received the first set of vaccines by day 60. So normally a newborn baby would receive BCG and hepatitis B at birth, but when the baby is sick in the NICU, we don't give them that. But this baby stayed in the NICU for 60 days plus. So we gave them the 2-month vaccine at 60 days. We gave the live vaccine just at discharge. The baby was discharged on day 94, so that's a very long stay, and that's what we expect. When the baby is born at 24, 25 weeks, we expect them to stay till 36 to 40 weeks, corrected gestational age. Here, the baby was off oxygen for nearly 2 weeks and was sucking all feeds. The parents are always trained in resuscitation training, basic life support at home. The follow-up was arranged in the neonatal clinic as well as the neurodevelopmental assessment. It's very important, as I told you, there is a risk of neurodevelopmental assessment problems in these babies, and the rehabilitation services keep them on track as well. So this is just a quick summary. I have a YouTube channel for patient education as well as for nurses and doctors education. You can go through that as well. Many common playlists are covered. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Sridhar, for highlighting a journey of one preterm baby, how complex, tidy, and meticulous the job that the NICU team is doing in order to keep these babies and help them go into the normal life. Purely a very complex and meticulous task, excellently performed by NICU team. I think one of the pillars of the success of the hospital, along with the obstetrics and gynecology, is the NICU support that this hospital has throughout from the beginning. And I think you and your team are doing a great job. I would like to congratulate and appreciate each and every member in the NICU team for this great work. And I'm glad that you have demonstrated to the team how complex is the role. So thank you so much.
Thank the NICU nurses especially, because you see how fragile these babies are and they're constantly by the bedside. The family is very stressed in these situations and they have to deal with the family's emotion as well. So hats off to our NICU nurses who are doing a great job. They're very patient, very talented, very skillful, and no words will match their work.
Excellent. And I'm glad to see this level of coordination between OBGYN, pediatric surgery, NICU, fetal medicine, rehab, pediatric subspecialties, general peds. Actually, this is the strength that we need always to maintain and grow, because this is our differentiator in the market. The level of teamwork and coordination and joint decision-making, multidisciplinary approach is what really differentiates this hospital from many of the hospitals I see in the market. So please continue this excellent coordination and collaboration and teamwork. Thank you very much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Sridhar.
Thank you to the admin team for great support as well. Thank you.
Any comment from any member about the Dr. Sridhar's presentation, please?